My daughter, Rain, and I were at the playground. We had left her doctor's appointment about an hour earlier, and I was still feeling numb. As I watched her sit and play in the sand, I tried to mentally will her to her feet because more than anything, I just wanted her to get up and start walking like all the other kids her age. Rain was a little over a year old, and she wasn't walking yet. She wasn't even standing yet. So I'd taken her to the doctor for a checkup, and that's when the doctor told me she thought that Rain had cerebral palsy. And I had no idea what that meant. She went on to explain to me that cerebral palsy was caused by damage in the brain. And for a second, I thought I misheard her. Did she just tell me my daughter had brain damage? And she explained that CP was sort of an all-encompassing umbrella term, and it ranged in severity. And Rain's CP seemed like it was on the milder side, but would have to start doing physical therapy right away if she wanted to avoid having to use a wheelchair. And I was taken aback because an hour ago, I thought she was just a little delayed, and now you're telling me she might be confined to a wheelchair for the rest of her life? And I thought about the stigma that came along with that, and I started to spiral a bit, and I started thinking about all the things that Rain might never be able to do and how she'd be different from all the other kids. And I felt like someone just punched me in the stomach because, to be honest, the thought of raising a kid with disabilities terrified me. And I felt like I had to fix her. So I decided, as her father, it was my job to do everything I could to make sure she learned how to walk. So shortly after that, my wife Valerie and I, we brought Rain and we met with a neurologist and an orthopedist and a physical therapist, and we had special braces made for her legs, and we found a place that did intensive physical therapy to help strengthen her core. We even flew to St. Louis so she could have this groundbreaking surgery that would reduce the spasticity in her muscles and give her more control over her body. But despite all the work and time and effort and hope that we poured into everything, Rain still wasn't able to walk on her own. And I'm a stay-at-home parent full-time, and I felt this tremendous pressure because I felt like it was my responsibility to push Rain to do all these exercises and stretches and routines that the doctors had recommended to get her up her feet and walking, but nothing we were doing was working. And I felt like I was failing her. And I felt like a terrible parent. And Rain was starting to get really frustrated with her lack of mobility and her lack of access to the world, and it was just gut-wrenching to watch her struggle like that. So she got a little older. Valerie and I decided we would get her a manual wheelchair. But again, I struggled with this decision because I felt like we were giving up hope that she'd ever walk on her own and that I'd be limiting her independence for the rest of her life. But as soon as Rain got into that chair, everything changed for her. In her chair at school, she could move around a classroom by herself. In her chair at home, she could go from her room to her toy room to the dining room without any help for Valerie and me. And suddenly she had independence, and that independence was giving her confidence. And I felt like her confidence was starting to rub off on me somehow. All of a sudden, I had the space to see beyond the things that Rain was struggling with, and I could focus on the things that she could do. And we were able to go out in the world and have adventures and experience things in a way that we were not able to do before she had that chair. And for the first time, I felt like we were starting to have fun. And I was able to be her dad instead of being her overbearing father that was constantly pushing her to try harder all the time. And man, Rain has gotten so good in that chair as she's gotten older. Recently, we were at the Botanical Gardens near our house in Pasadena, and she found this ramp that was beautiful. It like bridged this river, and it emptied into this courtyard with smooth, flat concrete surfaces. It's surrounded by flowers. It was like the perfect setting for her. And so she's just having a blast. She's going up and down this ramp, having a great time. And she's up at the top, getting ready to take another run down. And this random guy walks up and he says, "Man, that looks like fun. I'd like to give that a try." And she looks up at him and she says, "It is fun, but too bad for you because you weren't born with cerebral palsy, so you don't get to have a wheelchair." And then she spins and she takes off down the hill and she just starts yelling, "Check it out, everybody, kid with cerebral palsy coming through, who's jealous?" And I start cracking up and I'm watching her go flying down this hill with her hair blowing in the wind behind her. And I'm seeing the smiles on people's faces as she passes. And yet there were some looks of shock and concern, but most people were laughing like Valerie and I were. And I watched her and I just felt so proud of her. And sometimes I think back to that day at the playground where she was first diagnosed, and I think about how scared I was and how desperately I wanted her to walk and to fit in and to keep her out of that chair. She's almost 9 years old now, and I can't say that everything we've been through as a family has been easy, but I can say that when I look back on everything, I just feel lucky because somehow I wound up with this strong-willed, badass little girl who loves herself. And that's given me the space to believe in myself as a parent, to make me feel like I'm finally making the right choices for her. And that chair has so much to do with it because despite my fears, it's never been something that's confined her or limited her. It's a tool that's opened up the world to all of us. And I honestly do not care if she never takes an independent step in her life. And there's nothing about her that needs to be fixed because this kid is perfectly happy with who she is, exactly how she is. And now I know, as her dad, it's my job to do everything I can to make sure she never stops feeling that way. Thank you.